I just wanted to share with you briefly over the weeks a psalm that has really meant a lot to me, and that's Psalms 23. This psalm was written by David. I don't know if you remember when David was anointed as king by Samuel. Samuel went to Bethlehem, and in Bethlehem he was to go to the line of Jesse. And if you remember, Jesse had a bunch of sons, and one of the sons, they had gone through all the sons, and Samuel was looking for the one that God had anointed to be king. And what happened was this, is that they got through all of the sons, and they're like, what happened? There is none of these sons. Do you have any more sons? And Jesse says to Samuel, well, I have one. He's out in the field tending the sheep. And Samuel's like, well, I'm not starting in anything until he comes in from the field. And so they brought David in, and God looked at him and said he was a man after his own heart. That God looked at the inward appearance. Man looks at the outward appearance. And so he was just a young boy, and he really had a love for the Lord. And probably Psalms 23 was written out in a field as he was watching his sheep. And he was having this idea of like how God was to him as he was to the sheep. And so he writes this psalm from a perspective of a sheep. And so I wanted to share this psalm with you. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to take one verse for each week and go through it. There's so much to unpack in Psalms 23. But let's read it together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. This week, I just want to share the first verse, and I want to go over that with you. It says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I want you to just notice something here. He is basically making a statement. He's saying, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And David, as he knew that the health and the well-being of the sheep was based on the person that was caring for the sheep. From that would be the shepherd. I want to share a story with you. I grew up in the UP, out in the middle of nowhere, but every day we would drive by this farm, and this farm was just not taken care of. The house was falling apart, the barn was falling apart, the fences were falling apart, and as you looked at it, you could see that the animals that were there were not being taken care of. You could begin to see the ribs on the animals. Obviously, they were not being taken care of. And every day I go by and I'm like, man, I just feel so bad for these animals. They're not being taken care of. And it was just a little while later that actually the county came in and actually seized his animals because of neglect. And what you realize is that the shepherd or the carer or the farmer, the person who's taking care of the animals is based on how much the animal can be at peace, is based on whether or not he can trust the person that's caring for them. And so when you look at this, David was saying that the shepherd, which was the Lord, based on him having who he was, that because of who he was and because he had the ability to trust him, that he had the ability to say that he was without want. Now we have a different idea about want, about what that might mean. Our concept of want is like, well, I've got everything, right? I've got this, I've got the right car, I've got the right house, I've got all the toys. That's without want. Well, that's not really what he's really speaking of. A sheep needs to be nourished. A sheep needs to be able to lay down. A sheep needs to be able to rest. A sheep needs to be able to not be anxious. They're a very anxious animal. And so there is this need for them, and that's what God's saying. David is saying, because of the shepherd, because of who he is, I have the ability to say that I have without want, and I have that ability to trust and to be able to rest in God. And so what David is saying is that the Lord is my shepherd. And I want to read in John chapter 10. It's a little windy here, but in John chapter 10, I want you to see what Jesus says, because I think it's important. It says this: "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, and sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them, he flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me." Did you pick up on this, what Jesus was basically stating, and what Psalm 23 is stating? Jesus was saying, I'm the good shepherd. I am the shepherd that cares about you. I'm the one that actually owns the sheep, compared to the one that's a hired hand. The hired hand, as soon as he sees danger, he's like, I'm not risking my life for this. I'm not risking my life for these sheep. I'm out of here. Well, the owner says, you know what? I am laying my life on the line for them. And Jesus was saying, that is who he is. David understood that that's what his role was to do, is that he was to care for and to lay his life on the line for his sheep. And he was saying that that is what his Lord has done. And Jesus was stating that that's who he is. And we find later that he literally does lay his life down for us, that he lays his life on the cross and says, I will die in their place so that I can save them, so that they can be my sheep. The question in my mind is this, is who's the shepherd of your life? Who is it that shepherds your life? Are you trying to shepherd your life on your own? Because if you are, that shepherding of your life causes tons of anxiety. Why? Because you realize that you have no control over anything. Right now, we're in the midst of this crisis, and none of us could control it. None of us had anything to do with that. And we don't have any control over our job. We don't have any control over whether we are sick or not. We have the ability to maybe hinder it so that maybe we might not get sick. But the reality is that we don't have any control, which causes, when our life, we're saying, I'm just going to shepherd my own life, that causes all kinds of anxiety. Because why? Because we know we don't have any control over that. And when we start to and allow other people to shepherd our lives, where we say, well, you know, I've got this job, I've got this boss, or this person takes care of me, or this whatever, all of these people at some point or other will let you down. But when David was speaking, he was saying, Jesus, the Lord, is mine. He is personally mine. I'm one of his sheep, and he is my shepherd. And because I can totally trust that he is going to lay down his life and care for me, I am without want. I can trust that he has my best in mind. So my question to you today would be, who do you say the shepherd of your life is. Jesus has willingly offered himself to you to be your shepherd. He willingly laid down his life on the cross and paid the penalty for your sin so that you could have life with him, so there could be true life. Not this life in which we're just trying to make it through, but a life in which he says, I want you to have life, and I want you to have it to the fullness. And fullness of life, I mean, last year I was in Myanmar, one of the poorest nations in the world. And I have never seen such fullness of life as I saw there in the lives of people who have given their lives to Jesus Christ. They had a fullness of life that was amazing. It does not take money to have fullness of life. What it takes is who is the shepherd of your life? Who do you know that I can just trust and lay down my life and say, Lord, I'm yours, I'm your sheep. I surrender it to you. So the question is, in my mind, as I'm going through this crisis, is who's the shepherd of my life? And I know that the shepherd of my life is Jesus Christ. I've surrendered my life to him. I believe that he died on the cross for my sins. I have given my life to him, and I can rest and say I am without want. So I encourage you today, if you've never surrendered your life to Jesus and said, you know what, I want you to be the shepherd of my life, that today would be a day in which you surrender to him and say, I want you to be it. I want you to be my shepherd. Next week we'll talk about verse 2. Maybe we won't be out in this field. Maybe I won't be as cold. But I'm looking forward to being that. I hope that as we go through this, that maybe you'll memorize this passage. Maybe this memorizing of this passage, and every time something comes into your mind, anxiety comes in your mind, you can look at it and say, who's my shepherd? Jesus. And I can rest in him. Thanks so much.